Montana. It is the fourth largest state in the American Union, a territory larger than many nations people recognize on a map. And yet, barely 1 million souls call this place home. They call it Big Sky Country, a name earned not because the sky itself is different, but because the land beneath it slowly steps back, receding in every direction until distance becomes a physical presence, a tangible element you can feel. Out here, nature does not rush. It offers no explanations. It simply is. And the question that hangs in the thin, clear air is not what this place is, but for how much longer it can possibly remain this way. High in the northern ranges, a mass of ancient ice remains pressed into a mountain valley. This is Grinnell Glacier. It occupies far less space than it once did, leaving behind scarred, naked rock, where older photographs show a continuous, brilliant white. Each year, its frozen edge withdraws, a quiet and incremental defeat, exposing new ground, altering the very shape of the basin it carved. The change is recorded silently, through painstaking measurements, through comparisons of light and shadow, through repeat visits over the slow turning of the decades. It is a process gradual enough to escape notice in a single season, yet starkly, undeniably clear when viewed across a human lifetime. The glacier's modern story is not one of formation, but of dissolution. For generations, its retreat has been observed, its surface lowering and its reach shortening as the seasonal melt outpaces the recovery of winter. What remains persists only under a precise alchemy of shade, elevation, and snowfall, conditions that are becoming ever harder to maintain. Even as it vanishes, the ice is a source of life. Its meltwater flows downslope, the cold, clear lifeblood sustaining the streams and vegetation that have always depended upon its presence. The surrounding terrain is a functioning world. Grizzly bears, timeless inhabitants of this domain, move through tracks appear in snowfields and the soft ground near water. Occasionally, a bear and her cubs will cross an open slope, a brief and unscheduled passage, before disappearing back into the cover of the wild, their movements occurring entirely independent of our attention. The water that bleeds from the ice begins its long journey downward, eventually finding a profound stillness in the valley floor. Here, in the early hours, lies Lake McDonald. Its surface remains a perfect mirror, holding the reflection of the mountains until the first breath of wind arrives to break it. Along the shoreline, where water meets land, lie dense bands of flat stones. Their surfaces are a palette of the earth itself, ranging from pale gray to deep red, with impossible streaks of green and blue, made visible and brilliant as light passes through the clear, shallow water. The glacier recedes, the water flows, the stones remain. It is an environment of both relentless change and immense permanence, a land caught between what it was and what it is becoming. In this corner of the world, time itself is a sculptor. The stones that line the shore are its raw material, shaped by an ancient choreography of ice and water. First, by the slow, grinding passage of glaciers that carved this valley from the bedrock of the continent. Then, by the patient, rhythmic persuasion of the waves, a ceaseless polishing that has smoothed every edge, and over millennia, performed an endless sorting, a geological sieve that arranges them by weight and form along the shore. Submerged, they are transformed. The water acts as a liquid lens, stripping away the flat light of the air and revealing a palette of impossible depth and saturation. Under the calmest conditions, the lake bed, a mosaic of jasper and slate, becomes visible for many meters from the shore. For the native communities who have long called this land home, these are not mere stones. They are storytellers, artifacts of memory imbued with cultural significance. This belief is not a relic of the past, but a living covenant between people and place, influencing how this shoreline is treated and why it must be preserved. This is Lake McDonald, the largest body of water in Glacier National Park, a 10-mile expanse of liquid mirror held within a trough carved by unimaginable force. Its lifeblood is the cryosphere. Fed by the meltwater of high-altitude snowpack and mountain runoff, its temperature remains perpetually cold, a constant reminder of the icy chisel that gave it form. The wind is the lake's conductor. In moments of calm, the surface achieves a perfect, glassy stillness, reflecting the sky and the Sentinel Peaks. But then, a breeze descends from the high passes, and the reflection shatters into a million sustained ripples, redistributing light and fine sediment along the shore. The surrounding slopes rise in a gradual, forested embrace, a mix of conifers that changes in density with elevation, a living gradient marking the ascent from valley floor to alpine tundra. Human activity is a whisper here, concentrated at limited access points, leaving the vast majority of the shoreline to its wild and undeveloped state. Near its eastern edge, a human presence asserts itself, yet it does so with a quiet deference. McDonald Lodge, a monument of timber and stone, was raised in the early 20th century. Its architecture speaks a language of place. It is an embodiment of the rustic philosophy adopted by the National Park Service, a belief that structures should not conquer the landscape, but belong to it. Every log, every stone, was sourced locally, every joint hand-fitted, a testament to durability and a desire for visual harmony. The building remains in active use, a central gathering space where the clock of human activity, the foot traffic of daylight hours, the quiet descent of evening as temperatures drop, marks a temporary rhythm against the deep, geological time of the lake itself. It is a stable interface, a meeting point between the enduring and the ephemeral. But to truly understand this landscape, one must ascend, and the ascent is made possible by an engineering marvel born of necessity and ambition, the Going to the Sun Road. It does not force a straight line, an arrogant gash across the terrain. ACEs. Some sections are cut directly into the cliff, while others are held aloft by stacked masonry walls that seem to grow from the slope itself. Its construction, begun in the 1930s, was a feat of human tenacity. In an era of economic hardship, with machinery scarce, the road was carved largely by hand. Men clung to the cliff faces, drilling holes for explosives, clearing the fractured debris, and shaping the raw stone to accept a ribbon of pavement. Progress was dictated not by schedules, but by the mountain itself. Daylight, the stability of the slope, and above all, the snow. For much of the year, the high country was locked in ice, compressing the work into short, frantic seasonal windows. By modern standards, it is a narrow thread. Its sight lines are not governed by engineering preference, but by the unyielding contours of the land. As a vehicle climbs higher, the world changes. The air thins and cools. The dense forests give way. The tree cover recedes until only the raw, exposed rock remains dominant, a world above the world. The road is a testament to what can be built, a story of human will written across a vertical landscape. But the mountain is a testament to what simply is. It is a reminder that while we may etch our presence upon the stone, it is the stone, and the time it represents, that will always have the final word. As the asphalt climbs, the high country awakens. Water, born from the slow surrender of winter snow, traces its path across the roadway. It flows in shallow, transient channels, leaving behind a ghostly signature, the pale residue of minerals leached from the mountain's core, staining. From the scree and shadow, an ancient form materializes. Bighorn sheep, their powerful frames moving with a deliberate grace, descend directly onto the road's surface. They are not here for passage. They are drawn by a primal craving, a search for the essential minerals left behind by winter maintenance crews, the salt residues that have seeped into the very fabric of the road. A silent negotiation begins. Traffic slows to a crawl as the animals move without urgency, their presence an undeniable claim to this territory. They stand or walk along the warm asphalt, sovereign and unhurried, before returning to the higher ground from which they came. In this theater of instinct, there is no need for barriers or signs. The encounter is governed by an unwritten law, a language of proximity and terrain, where human behavior adjusts in deference to a wilder, more permanent authority. The ascent culminates at a broad saddle in the mountains, a place of wind and sweeping vistas known as Logan Pass. This is the spine of the continent, the great hydrological divide. Here, at an elevation of more than 6,600 feet, a line of profound consequence is drawn across the landscape. Precipitation falling on one side of this ridge begins a long journey toward the Pacific Ocean. On the other, it is destined for the Atlantic. Snow persists here, a stubborn remnant of winter's rain, clinging to the slopes deep into the summer months, compressed by its own immense weight into dense, unyielding fields. Against the dark rock and lingering snow, apparitions of white appear. Mountain goats, their pale coats a stark contrast to the severe terrain, navigate the precipitous cliffs. They are masters of the vertical world, moving across sheer surfaces with an impossible confidence. This agility is a marvel of evolution, owed to specialized hooves, cleft, ple. While they roam with an absolute freedom, human movement is carefully, the erosion of this fragile alpine tundra, but to maintain a fragile peace, a respectful and necessary separation between the world of the visitor and the world of the wild. The road descends, winding its way into a valley where time itself seems to move at a different pace. At a crossroads of gravel and dust, a structure stands sentinel. Its wooden storefront shows the marks of a long and functional life, a history of repeated repairs rather than renovation. Boards have been replaced as needed, one by one, and the paint is worn thin, a patina etched by 1,000 storms. This is Polebridge. It is a settlement not organized around the principles of growth or efficiency, but around the unyielding realities of distance and access. The year-round population remains profoundly small, its daily routines shaped not by clocks, but by the fundamental necessities, by supply runs, by the caprice of weather, and by the ever-changing condition of the surrounding roads. Communication is a deliberate act, relying on satellite signals plucked from the void, or the simple necessity of direct travel. Deliveries are not a guarantee. They arrive only when conditions allow. Those who visit, drawn here primarily during the warmer months, are often seeking the absence of infrastructure rather than the presence of attractions. The lack of grid electricity is not a statement or a lifestyle choice. It is simply the condition under which this community functions, the unquestioned baseline of existence. Life centers on a single structure that serves a multitude of purposes. The mercantile is more than a store. It is a supply point, a bakery, a community of limited power and equipment. People gather briefly on the porch outside, often standing with fresh food in hand before continuing on their way. Conversation is minimal, an economy of words born from a shared understanding that requires little explanation. Individuals arrive and depart without a discernible pattern, their movements governed by their own quiet purposes. Between these fleeting moments of human activity, the area returns to an immense and profound stillness, a silence that holds the true character of the place. Here, life continues to operate within fixed constraints, a steady rhythm defined by a covenant of isolation. Supply limits and the stark, practical requirements of remaining off the grid dictate the pace of human existence. It is a life lived in the shadow of a far greater, more ancient power. Elsewhere, water falls. Here, at a place marked on maps as Kutani, it is driven. The river narrows, compressed between unyielding rock walls, gathering its formidable momentum before it shatters into a sequence of short, violent drops. The current, a relentless force, strikes the uneven stone faces and atomizes into a cold, heavy spray that perpetually settles back onto the already darkened, slicked rock. The sound is the dominant reality, a continuous and percussive roar, a wall of white noise so forceful and so steady it obscures all other activity, erasing the calls of birds, the rustle of unseen life in the undergrowth, the very sound of one's own thoughts. To move through this section of the river is to be committed to its furious, singular direction, a passage that leaves no room for pause, no possibility of reflection. This is Kutani Falls, a name that appears with quiet frequency in the credits of films and the pages of regional records. Its raw, cinematic form requires no alteration for visual storytelling. When it was selected as a location for the film The Revenant, the logic of the landscape dictated everything fluctuated elements, but around the sheer, untamable volume of the water, the jagged architecture of exposed rock, and the fleeting moods of natural light, it was a temporary occupation. Once filming concluded, the crew vanished, and the river continued its charge at the exact same pace, through the exact same channel, leaving not a single visible trace of this brief, elaborate human presence. But long before the cameras arrived, this was a place of profound spiritual reckoning. For generations, it was used for solitary ceremonial practices by indigenous communities. Individuals would remain near the water for extended periods, deliberately exposed to the full force of the weather, the deafening sound, and the deep, resonant isolation. The unsparing conditions of the site itself determine the duration of the vigil and the limits of human endurance. Access required immense, deliberate effort, and the constant, overwhelming flow of the water served to reduce all external distraction, focusing the mind. These ancient practices relied entirely on the setting as it existed, without modification, without enclosure, without appeal. Today, the approach remains limited by the terrain, rather than by fences or barriers. Worn paths guide movement, allowing one to get close enough for observation, but not for interaction. Most visitors stop only briefly. They watch the water pass, a spectacle of pure, indifferent energy, and then they move on. And the river continues, as it always has, carving its way through the same channel, maintaining its immutable force and direction, under conditions that have remained, for millennia, largely unchanged. From the river's violent, singular purpose, the landscape opens onto a different scale of being, Flathead Lake. This is a body of water that occupies a scale exceeding immediate human perception. Its impossible depth and profound width limit any clear reference points, especially beyond the near shore. Out on its surface, distance becomes an illusion. Objects that enter the water disappear with unnerving speed, and any movement beneath the surface is almost impossible to track. These are the conditions that have sustained the long-standing accounts of large, unidentifiable shapes observed in the deep. The descriptions are inconsistent, fragmented, yet they are repeated decade after decade. These stories persist not through any shred of evidence, but through the lake's sheer physical capacity to withhold clarity, to keep its own counsel. The mystery is not a fiction imposed upon the lake. It is a quality inherent in its very nature. Human activity, in the face of such immensity, does not conquer. It concentrates along specific, defensible edges. One such concentration occurs near the town of Big Fork, where the vastness is temporarily tamed. Here, access points, private docks, and the hum of boat traffic narrow into a defined, manageable zone of human enterprising, a reachable range during certain seasons. It is a practical, predictable engagement with a place that is, in its totality, neither. The boats and the anglers work the margins, while the immense, silent heart of the lake remains aloof, its dark ledger of secrets undisturbed. We are left only with the stories we tell ourselves at the edge of the water, echoes in the constant sound of a world that was here long before us and will remain long after we are gone. Here, on the edge of a vast and silent water, the human impulse to conquer, to chart, to pursue, dissolves. The sheer scale of the lake renders such ambitions futile. It does not invite definition, it commands observation. One simply watches and waits. Above the surface, life asserts itself in brief, startling flashes. Along the shoreline, ancient trees and stony bluffs serve as thrones for the bald eagle. From these fixed vantages, they hold dominion over the water, their gaze a study in absolute stillness. For hours, they are monuments of feathered patience, their world reduced to the subtle shifts of light and wind upon the liquid expanse. Their activity is never wasted. It is a direct and brutal calculus of energy expended versus sustenance gained, triggered only when a fish dares to rise near the sunlit ceiling of its world. The descent is a moment of pure violence, a punctuation mark in the long sentence of the lake's tranquility. It lasts only seconds, a controlled fall, a precise and final clasp of talons, a powerful beat of wings against gravity. There is no discernible pattern to these events. They are sudden, isolated, and absolute. Afterward, the bird returns to its perch, and the water seals itself over again, a mirror of patient sky, its profound depths undisturbed. The lake continues its layered existence, a single space where the currents of practical fishing, the echoes of local story, and the primal dramas of wildlife overlap, each leaving the fundamental character of the place unaltered. Further inland, the landscape changes. The water gives way to an ocean of grass, a rolling country of immense and subtle power. Here, on the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Bison Range, the ground is shaped not by machinery, but by the patient, persistent patterns of grazing. The surface is uneven, a testament to the lives lived upon it. Paths emerge not from design, but from the repeated weight of hooves pressing the vegetation flat, only to vanish again as the seasons turn and the relentless growth returns. There are no fences here to carve the interior into manageable segments. Control is exerted only at the perimeter, a gentle container for a vast, continuous whole. This is a land managed through seasonal use, not permanent alteration. For more than a century, this was not the case. Authority rested with a distant federal government, separating the land from the communities who had known it, used it, and understood it long before the drawing of administrative lines. Then, in the year 2020, a profound shift occurred. Management authority was formally transferred back to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. No new infrastructure appeared. No new markers were driven into the soil. The change was invisible to the casual eye, yet it was seismic. What shifted was responsibility. The sacred duties of determining access, of managing wildlife, of planning for a future that stretches across generations. These return to the people whose relationship with this ground predates any map or treaty. Across this restored range, the bison move. They flow in loosely organized groups, their paths dictated by the availability of forage, not by fixed routes. Their very presence is a creative force, shaping the earth through the pressure of their bodies, the hollows of their wallows, and the deep memory of their migrations. Within the heart of the reserve, when the season turns, the primal law of the rut takes hold. Adult bulls, immense and formidable, separate from the larger herds to engage in contests of pure strength. The encounters are brief and elemental. They are not battles of speed, but of immovable force, short charges, lowered heads, and a sustained, earth-shaking push. Clouds of ancient soil billow for a moment, then settle back into the earth. The animals disengage without external command, and the slow, deliberate movement across the open ground resumes. These are not display animals, curated for a human audience. They are a self-governing nation, allowed to live according to their own ancient patterns, with human interference limited to the quiet observation of the herd and the steadfast guardianship of the boundary. The land can support this magnificent scale of life because it remains whole, its integrity valued above subdivision. What is visible here is not a restoration project in its infancy, but a living, breathing landscape where authority, wildlife, and space have been brought back into a fragile, powerful alignment. It stands as a testament not to what has been lost, but to what can be reclaimed when the right to care for a place is returned to those who call it home. Here, the land is written in water. Rivers carve their way through narrow valleys, and the forest, a vast head by the slow violence of runoff and the annual melt of mountain snow. There is no attempt to tame this place. Great trees, fallen in silence, are left to decompose where they land, becoming architecture for the undergrowth, their decaying forms feeding the very soil that will birth their successors. Paths are fleeting suggestions, etched into the loam by passing creatures, only to be reclaimed by the relentless green tide of the forest floor. To move through this terrain is to surrender to the logic of the waterway, the only consistent artery through a labyrinth of dense timber and impassable slopes. Within these ancient corridors lies the Lolo National Forest, a landscape that holds the echo of a much earlier journey. The journals of Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, penned in the early 19th century, read not as maps, but as dialogues with the land. Progress was not measured in miles, but in the slow unfolding of river bends, in the subtle shifts of vegetation, in the hard limits imposed by weather and the sheer verticality of the earth. 2 centuries later, the fundamental truths of this place remain unaltered. Passage is still a negotiation, dictated not by the straight line of human will, but by the caprice of the current, the density of the forest, the angle of the slope. The wild is a ghost. Its presence is felt, not seen, a track pressed into the soft earth by a riverbank, the stark geometry of a carcass revealing the signature of a pack hunt. When darkness falls, the physics of the landscape change. Sound becomes the dominant sense, traveling farther than the eye can ever reach. It is then that the gray wolves reclaim their domain. Their howls are not wild, chaotic displays, but a form of deliberate communication, a sustained, resonant signal carrying across valleys and ridgelines, mapping their territory in sound. The call is sent, it is received, and then the silence returns, deeper than before. The human footprint here is light, transient. Campsites bloom near the water's edge, then vanish, leaving no scar. There are no permanent structures, no monuments to passage or control. The forest endures as a connected, breathing system of river, Timbero the logic of the city. Here, in Missoula, the water is disciplined. The riverbed is no longer a product of geology, but of engineering, deliberately shaped, armored against its own power, forced into a fixed pattern to regulate the seasonal pulse of the flood. Where the current is squeezed, a paradox is born, a wave that does not travel. It is a feature of pure pressure, a liquid sculpture held in place by the relentless force of the river, a standing wave that exists only as long as the discharge from upstream holds steady. And from this act of control, an unintended freedom emerged. River surfing, a culture born not of oceans and tides, but of flood control infrastructure. The approach is direct, from the bank itself. Boards meet the water at a shallow angle, locking into the churning face. The rider is suspended, held static against the immense power of the current. There is no forward momentum, no journey from one point to another. All that matters is the subtle language of balance, the constant, minute adjustments against a force that never yields. It is an activity without schedules or oversight, governed only by the release of water from a dam, the memory of mountain snow. The equipment is minimal, the experience, elemental. Two rivers, born of the same mountains, tell two different stories. One, a journey through a wilderness where freedom is measured by the sheer absence of barriers, a path dictated by the land itself. The other, a dance in a single, man-made place, a freedom discovered not in limitless space, but within the very heart of constraint, a testament to the human instinct to find a current and ride it wherever it may be found. Here, the riverbank is a shared threshold. Entry and exit points are not exclusive, but common ground for those who walk, fish, or cycle along its edge. The river itself, an ancient and indifferent force, continues its primary function, carving a path through the land, utterly oblivious to the human activities that grace its surface. To surf here is to operate within this immense, perpetual flow. It is a fleeting partnership, a momentary dance with a power that will not be reshaped, only ridden. The practice demands an intimate understanding of the current, a surrender to conditions rather than a conquest of them. Beyond its banks, the water gives way to a landscape defined by a different kind of flow. This is Paradise Valley. Long, sweeping tracts. They are divided by working fences and access gates, lines of wire and wood dictated by the stark logic of containment and passage. On the flattest ground, where the soil is richest, lie the hayfields, their seasonal growth a measure of the valley's vitality. The ranch houses and barns are positioned with a pragmatist's eye, their placement a careful calculation of wind exposure, access to water, and a respectful distance from the river's memory of seasonal floods. Movement across this valley is slow, deliberate, and functional, its pace set not by the demands of traffic or tourism, but by the unhurried schedules of livestock and the timeless routines of agriculture. This working landscape has become one of the most recognizable backdrops in the world, the real-world stage for the televised drama of Yellowstone. Yet the resemblance that viewers notice is structural, not staged. The fiction is merely a reflection of a deeper, more enduring reality. The vast, unbroken ranch parcels, the uninterrupted sightlines, the profound proximity of river, pasture, and foothills. These elements existed long before the first cameras arrived. Filming required minimal alteration, for the simple reason that the valley already operated at the epic scale the show portrays. The dominant use of this land remains, as it has for generations, the work of the ranch. Cattle move between grazing areas according to meticulous rotation plans. Equipment sits in the open, positioned not for a scene, but for repeated grueling use. Roads serve the needs of property access more than public transit, with long, quiet miles between buildings. The valley does not present itself as a set. It functions continuously, its agricultural cycles proceeding unchanged, its ownership patterns remaining intact. The drama of television occurs around its existing operations, a temporary story layered upon a permanent one. Public attention has brought visibility, but it has not redefined the soul of the place. But travel away from this pastoral expanse, and another Montana reveals itself, one shaped not by what grows from the soil, but by what was torn from beneath it. Here, industrial structures rise from uneven ground, their monumental scale set by the logic of extraction, not settlement. This is the legacy of a Montana once plunged into the earth. Brick buildings, stained by time and industry, cluster near the ghostly footprints of former processing sites, their arrangement a map of proximity to labor and transport, orderly grid of long-term planning. Activity here was once continuous, a relentless engine operating in shifts that blurred the line between day and night. What remains are the fixed forms built to support that sustained, ravenous output. This environment was not born of the frontier movement, but of an insatiable demand for copper. That demand required permanent infrastructure, a stable workforce, and the iron fist of centralized control. Housing, unions, and entire civic institutions grew in the shadow of the mines. And even after the production slowed and the shafts fell silent, the built environment remained, a colossal architecture of ambition, too large to remove, and too specific in its function to ever be entirely repurposed. The city's past is etched into its very bones, a permanent testament to a wealth won from the deep. It stands as a profound contrast, a landscape not worked with, but conquered. Around the remnants of a former age, the city carries on, its modern life an echo of an industrial scale that once defined its very existence. It was a scale born of extraction, a gravitational pull that concentrated labor and of justified endurance, a belief in the endless bounty of the earth below. When the fortunes of the mines shifted, the city adapted, absorbing the loss, its deep roots allowing it to survive at a reduced, yet still vital, scale. But not all such places cross that threshold of resilience. Other sites, born of the same initial, feverish impulse, were built on foundations of immediacy, not longevity. When their single purpose faltered, there was nothing to cushion the fall, no secondary industry to absorb the sudden void. Bannack represents that other outcome. It was a town summoned into existence by the glint of gold, a settlement that erupted from the landscape to serve the fever of the mines. Buildings were thrown up for immediate use, their raw timbers echoing with urgency, not the quiet confidence of long-term growth. Life, commerce, and rudimentary governance all unfolded along a single artery of packed earth. And when the earth began to yield less, the decline was as swift as the ascent. The population, once drawn by a powerful current, simply evaporated. Businesses shuttered their doors, services ceased. The term ghost town speaks less to spectral folklore and more to a sudden void in function. Bannack was left almost perfectly intact for one simple reason. There was no economic pressure to rebuild, no impulse to modernize, no reason to tear down what was left behind. The exodus was so rapid that abandonment outpaced decay. The physical system, the alignment of its streets, the layout of its interiors, did not collapse. The human activity within it merely stopped. Where Butte adapted, contracting to survive, Bannack simply ceased. Today, it remains as a complete settlement without daily use, a place preserved not by careful restoration, but by the profound stillness of absence. Yet not all settlements in this vast landscape were born of such volatile speculation. Consider Lewistown. It did not rise from a seam of precious metal, but grew organically as a service town, a nexus for the sprawling ranch lands, the endless grain fields, and the vital transport routes of central Montana. Its purpose was coordination, not extraction. Its growth was steady, deliberate, shaped by the rhythms of agriculture rather than the gamble of a boom. That stability remains etched into the very use of the surrounding land. And it is this enduring pattern that invites another, older presence. Each year, as autumn chills the high country, the great bull elk descend from the mountain elevations. A sound begins to drift across the landscape, a strange, ethereal bugle. It is the sound of dominance being contested, of an ancient cycle reasserting itself. The call carries for miles, flowing over open fields, seeping into the very edges of Lewistown itself. It is often heard long before any animal is seen, a herald of their arrival. The elk are not contained by human boundaries. They materialize any's. For the residents, this is not an intrusion, but a familiar cadence. The calls signal a brief, seasonal overlap, a time when the routines of human life and the imperatives of wildlife movement occupy the same space. Then, within a few weeks, the bugling fades, the herds retreat to higher ground, and the town resumes its rhythm, seemingly unchanged. No monuments are built to mark their passage. There is only the collective memory, the shared familiarity with its inevitable return. But the land here holds memories of other events, not cyclical, but cataclysmic. Events that leave a more permanent, more visceral scar. In a narrow mountain valley, a body of water lies unnaturally still. This is Quake Lake, a landscape defined not by slow decline or steady rhythm, but by a single moment of violent transformation. It is bordered by steep, fractured slopes and a shoreline drawn by chaos. And from its silent depths, a dead forest rises. The skeletal trunks of great trees, drowned where they stood, reach for a sky they will never touch again. Their tops, bleached by the sun, stand exposed, while their bases remain locked in the cold, dark water below. They are a silent, stark testament to the night the mountain fell, a permanent monument not to human endeavor, but to the immense, indifferent power that can remake the world in an instant. The water here lies still, a placid mirror to the sky, but the surrounding terrain tells a different story. These are not the gentle signatures of erosion, carved over millennia by patient water and ice. These are the scars of a sudden, violent upheaval, of a landscape fractured and remade in a single night. This place did not grow. It was born in a single, violent act. This is Quake Lake. On the night of August 17, 1959, as campers slept along the banks of the Madison River, the Earth's crust deep beneath Montana buckled. A seismic shock, registering a magnitude of 7.5, tore through the bedrock. In the disorienting darkness, the southern wall of the Madison Canyon, a mass of 80 million tons of rock, soil, and ancient forest, was unchained from gravity. It moved not as a slide, but as an avalanche of solid earth, thundering into the valley at over 100 miles per hour. In less than a minute, the Madison River, a waterway that had flowed for ages, was choked into silence. The colossal wave of debris slammed into the opposite canyon wall, surging hundreds of feet up its slope before settling into a raw, colossal dam. Behind this instantaneous barrier, the river's flow, with nowhere to go, began to rise. The water crept up the trunks of Douglas firs and lodgepole pines, swallowing the valley floor. What had been a river at dusk was, by dawn, a rapidly deepening lake. The event consumed everything in its path. A highway, campgrounds teeming with summer visitors, entire groves of pine. All were buried beneath a tomb of debris hundreds of feet deep. Seismic instruments registered the tremor, but the transformation on the ground was already absolute. Seeing the terrifying prospect of the natural dam's failure, blasted a spillway to control the water level, to tame the outlet and prevent a second, even greater catastrophe downstream. The lake, however, remained. Below the surface, a silent forest remains. Preserved by the cold, oxygen-starved water, the skeletal trunks of ancient pines still stand, reaching for a sun they will never again see. They are a ghostly testament to the original landscape, a visible record of the world that vanished in a matter of moments. Quake Lake has become a touchstone in the study of natural hazards, a stark lesson in how swiftly the solid world can liquefy, how entire terrains can be rewritten faster than human systems can possibly react. Today, the lake does not behave unusually. It holds water, it supports fish, it reflects the surrounding slopes, now softened by time. Its profound significance lies not in what it is, but in how it came to be, an origin story that remains etched, without need for interpretation, onto the very face of the land. But the river was not destroyed. It was merely redirected. Downstream from the Great Scar, beyond the shadow of the landslide, the Madison continues its journey. Here, the water's character transforms. It flows clear and predictable, its pulse regulated not by sudden cataclysm, but by the steady measure of upstream controls. It moves through a broad valley, its secrets written on the surface, in the subtle seams where currents meet, over shallow gravel beds, and around bends sculpted by a patient, consistent force. It is here that an ancient ritual unfolds, a quiet dialogue between humanity and the river. This is a world-renowned destination for the art of fly fishing. The method is, in principle, one of supreme simplicity. An angler stands, not as a conqueror, but as an observer. The cast is a whisper, a delicate offering of feather and thread sent to ride the current. The goal is not force, but timing. not volume, but precision. The trout, creatures of instinct and efficiency, hold in these predictable lanes, waiting for the current to deliver their sustenance. They return to the same lies, day after day, in a rhythm as old as the river itself. Success is a matter of perception, of understanding the river's subtle language, of placing the artificial fly in the exact lane where the fish expects its meal to appear. The line is lifted, the fish is guided in, and then, almost always, it is returned to the cold, clear water. The practice demands an inversion of modern impulse. More time is spent in stillness, in observation, than in action. It is a discipline of watching the water, of waiting for the precise moment when the human world and the river's world can briefly intersect. Two stretches of a single river, a few miles apart, tell two profoundly different stories. One speaks of geological time compressed into a terrifying instant, a reminder that the ground beneath our feet is not static, but a living entity capable of unimaginable violence. The other speaks of cycles, of patience, of a delicate balance that can be observed, understood, and even joined. The valley, shaped by an event that required no human witness and lasted only moments, now offers a space for quiet contemplation. It teaches that while we may seek to read the water and predict its flow, we do so always in the shadow of a power that operates on a scale beyond our own, a power that writes its history not in ink, but in stone. The equipment is refined, almost invisible. The movement, a study in minimalism. Every motion is calculated to avoid disturbing the current, for here, the water is the arbiter. This restrained approach has consecrated the river as a sanctuary for anglers who seek not a contest, but a communion. They value control, the profound consistency of the flow, and a silence that allows for the deepest focus. Yet, despite this reputation as a fisherman's paradise, the river operates under an older, more fundamental law. It is a managed system first, and a destination second. The human activity is a whisper that fits within the roar of the water, relying on the stable, engineered conditions rather than the spectacle of a wild, untamed force. It is a quiet partnership, dictated entirely by the river's terms. High above, near the vast expanse of big sky, the landscape holds its breath. Snow, packed hard as stone, clings to the shaded boles of the mountains, a stubborn remnant of winter storms long past. It leaves narrow, brilliant bands of white, tracing the ridgelines and the dark breaks in the timber. In these upper elevations, the silence is sometimes broken by a story written overnight in the snow. Tracks appear, moving in impossibly straight, efficient lines. They are spaced with the even cadence of a metronome, cutting across steep slopes without a moment's hesitation. Wildlife biologists know the signature. The size, the depth, the length of the stride all point to a single author, the mountain lion. Sightings are a matter of legend, fleeting glimpses that blur into myth. But no other creature moves across this terrain with such ghostly purpose. The surrounding landscape remains a tapestry of the ancient and the modern. The steel skeletons of ski infrastructure and the asphalt scars of roads coexist with pre-modern hunting routes, corridors of instinct carved into the land centuries before the first surveyor arrived. Above the valley floor, the singular outline of Lone Peak defines the horizon. Here, weather stations and avalanche control routes are seasonal monuments to human ambition. Lift systems stand dormant for half the year, silent sentinels waiting for the snow. Yet the mountain itself remains an integral part of a larger, wilder system, a vital corridor for wildlife moving between the Great Ranges. An unspoken treaty governs this shared space. Human activity concentrates in the harsh light of day, while the true life of the mountain stirs after dark. This alternating use of the land reduces conflict, a temporal boundary that requires no fences. The city of Bozeman. Here, the past and future collide. Office parks dedicated to software and research rise alongside weathered cattle pastures. Renovated industrial buildings, once hubs of a different economy, now house engineers and remote technologists. Many of these new residents have chosen this place not for urban density, but for its precise opposite, a proximity to public land, to the vast, untamed spaces. This demographic shift has ignited housing demand and irrevocably altered the patterns of land use. And still, daily life for everyone, old and new, remains tethered to the fundamental realities of this place: the weather, the immense distances, and the unyielding limits of the seasons. The region makes no effort to resolve this paradox. It supports both worlds at once, with no clear line of separation between them. The Yellowstone River is the constant. Water moves steadily through its broad channel, a conveyor of sediment and temperature, carrying the memory of high elevations downstream. Its flow, consistent across the seasons, is shaped by the slow melt of mountain snowpack and the careful logic of controlled release, not the sudden fury of rainfall. Along its banks, life thrives in the shallow edges and deeper runs it creates. It is a continuous living system, not a mere scenic feature. Its course dictates the movement of fish, of wildlife, and of human access, a single, uninterrupted artery through the heart of the land. It is the one thing that connects the silent hunter in the snows, the patient angler in the current, and the software engineer gazing out at the peaks. It is the force that holds these disparate worlds in a single, indivisible frame. Where the deep forest yields, the landscape transforms. Near the administrative heart of Mammoth Hot Springs, the wild gives way to managed open ground. Here, a strange and ancient truce is brokered not by man, but by the earth itself. A hidden furnace, deep within the planet's crust, breathes warmth into the soil through the long winter months. This geothermal heat creates an unnatural oasis. While the surrounding terrain lies frozen and locked beneath a heavy shroud of white, the snow cover here remains thin or vanishes altogether. The grass, impossibly, stays accessible. And so they come. Great herds of elk descend from the high country, gathering in large numbers to use these manicured lawns and open spaces, areas originally cleared for human visibility and access. They have become an integral, almost spectral feature of the town. The animals rest, feed, and move through these spaces with a profound indifference, their ancient rhythms unaltered by the nearby buildings or the slow crawl of vehicles. Their presence is a constant, a predictable migration dictated by cold and comfort, especially when the higher elevations become inhospitable fortresses of ice and wind. But this fragile peace is an exception. To truly understand this land, one must ascend, leaving the tamed world behind. The journey begins on a ribbon of asphalt known as the Beartooth Highway. The road climbs relentlessly, pulling away from the forested slopes and into the raw, open exposure of the alpine terrain. Here, the trees thin out, their twisted forms testifying to a constant battle with the elements, until they disappear entirely. Exposed rock, scoured by glaciers and fractured by millennia of frost, becomes the dominant feature. The highway's switchbacks are carved directly into the contours of the plateau. For long, heart-stopping stretches, there are no barriers, no guardrails separating the pavement from the sheer drop-offs. The road is not a path through the mountain, it is a precarious ledge upon its surface. At this elevation, weather is not a forecast, it is an immediate and volatile force. Snowfields can linger deep into the summer, and the wind, finding no obstruction, moves with an elemental power across the vast, open expanse. Vehicles slow, not for traffic, but out of necessity. Visibility can collapse in moments, and the steep grade demands absolute respect. This route is legendary, its reputation built on a foundation of scale rather than ornament. It crosses one of the highest paved passes in the United States, maintaining its course for long stretches above 10,000 feet. The journalist Charles Kuralt, a man who had seen the breadth of the nation, once described it as the most beautiful drive in the country. It was a statement born not of a single, perfect viewpoint, but of the road's relentless exposure and its profound, overwhelming continuity. This is not a road that leads toward development or settlement. It exists for a single purpose: to traverse a terrain that fundamentally resists a permanent human footprint. And yet, life endures. Along the rocky margins, in the crevices and boulder fields warmed by the direct, high-altitude sun, live the marmots. They remain tethered to the safety of cover, emerging only briefly to feed before retreating back into their subterranean world. When disturbed, they emit sharp, piercing alarm calls that carry with startling clarity across the open ground. A network of sentinels, broadcasting warnings that mark movement long before an animal is ever seen. These signals punctuate the silence of the high peaks, a constant, audible reminder of the vigilance required to survive here. But even this high road is merely a prelude. Beyond the highway, the elevation continues its inexorable rise. The skyline sharpens into blades of stone, and all human roots disappear. Here, Granite Peak stands apart from the surrounding summits. Its distinction comes not from height alone, but from sheer, unforgiving difficulty. To reach its summit requires a mastery of complex navigation across treacherous snowfields, shifting scree, and exposed, vertical faces. The windows of safe weather are perilously narrow. Retreat is often a slower, more dangerous proposition than the ascent itself. From these unforgiving heights, the world of man reasserts itself in the basin far below. The city of Billings spreads across a wide section of the Yellowstone River Valley. Its identity is etched into the landscape by the geometry of rail lines, the silhouettes of refineries, and the sprawling footprints of warehouses. This is a city born of function, a hub of industry and transportation. Billings developed where access mattered more than scenery, its purpose to serve the vast economies of ranching, energy, and regional trade, rather than the fleeting gaze of the tourist. It is a place of commerce and consequence, grounded in the practicalities of the earth. In the shadow of its industrious present lies the Little Bighorn battlefield, a quiet, somber testament to a deeper, more violent struggle for this very land. Three worlds occupying the same geography, yet separated by elevation, by purpose, by time. The elk grazing on geothermally warmed earth, the highway clinging to the mountain's face, the city humming with the work of a nation. Each represents a different negotiation with the wild, one of accommodation, one of passage, and one of dominion. Yet the granite peaks remain aloof, indifferent to these arrangements. They hold the memory of ice and fire, and measure time not in seasons or generations, but in the slow, inevitable erosion of stone itself. From a distance, the land reveals its purpose. It is a canvas built for movement, for the long, straight lines of commerce and migration that define a continent. Here, the earth seems to yield, shaped for the transit of goods and people across horizons that feel limitless. Along the city's edge, this narrative of human design meets an abrupt and ancient boundary. A continuous wall of sandstone cleaves the plains from the suburbs, a natural rampart known as the Rim Rocks. These formations rise above the grid of neighborhoods and the hum of highways, their presence a constant, quiet assertion of geological time. There is no dramatic peak, no singular spire to command the eye. Their power is in their persistence, a scale best understood not in the detail of a single stone, but in the sheer, unbroken miles of their length, a fixed horizon that has watched impassively as the city below has grown, changed, and forgotten. This is a landscape that holds a deeper history. Across the Regereers, but instruments, they were buffalo jumps, places where the elevation of the earth and the instincts of a herd were woven together into a deadly, efficient trap. A strategy born not of physical walls, but of a profound understanding of the land itself. In the modern city, that specific history is absorbed, dissolved into the larger presence of the cliffs, rather than memorialized at a single site. Traveling east, the human footprint thins. The city recedes, and the terrain breathes again, opening into the vast, rolling grasslands of the high plains. This journey is a passage into a different kind of memory, one recorded not in stone walls, but in the open air. This is the approach to the Little Bighorn, a battlefield where the very openness of the hills dictated the course of a legendary defeat. In 1876, the lack of cover, the deceptive folds of the land, and the sheer expanse of the ground shaped a military catastrophe that unfolded not in a single, desperate clash, but across miles of scattered, desperate positions. Today, the outcome is documented by stark white markers, placed where men fell. But these markers are small points in an immense and largely unchanged landscape. It is the ground itself, the draws, the coulees, the endless sightlines, that remains the most complete and unforgiving witness to the events of that day. Further on, the earth undergoes a violent transformation. The gentle rolls of the plains suddenly collapse, torn open to form the Bighorn Canyon. Here, the plateau is cleaved by deep, sheer walls, a brutal geometry cut into the stone. It is a place of profound verticality, where elevation changes not over miles, but in a single, breathtaking drop. Above, the ground remains open, windswept, and sparsely vegetated, But below, in the canyon's depths, movement is no longer free. It is confined to narrow, twisting paths, carved by millennia of erosion and the simple, relentless pull of gravity. Access is a privilege, not a right. Much of this domain exists without permanent roads or structures, leaving vast sections of the canyon in a state of profound, undisturbed solitude. This terrain is the architect of its own isolation, and within it, a different kind of life persists. This is the kingdom of the wild mustangs. They are ghosts of a more recent past, descendants of animals lost or set free during the great upheavals of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Over generations, they have been forged by this unforgiving landscape, adapting to its harsh conditions, their survival tied to the seasonal availability of water and forage. They move in small, tightly knit bands, their social structure as fluid and resilient as the land they occupy. Their roots are not fixed to one place, yet their repeated passage creates faint, ghostly trails across the open ground, the only sign of their dominion. To see them is to witness a perfect union of animal and environment. They travel in coordinated, flowing groups, maintaining an effortless distance while moving at speed. When startled, they do not scatter. They accelerate, a unified force of muscle and instinct, crossing the broken, uneven terrain without a flicker of hesitation. Hoofprints appear in the dust, a brief testament to their passing, and then, just as quickly, they fade. Sightings are rare, unpredictable. There is no infrastructure here to accommodate visitors, no viewing platforms built to frame their existence. Human management is a light touch, focused on monitoring population, never on confinement. They endure precisely because the canyon endures. They persist because the sheer, uncompromising topography limits access and discourages the steady pressure of human use. What remains is not a preserve, but a working landscape in its purest form. A place where every movement, every life, every moment of conflict or peace is ultimately dictated not by will, but by the unyielding contours of the earth. Here, wild mustangs move according to unseen markers, navigating the canyon not as a thing to be altered, but as a world to be inhabited. This is a landscape that remains wide, long after the road has surrendered to the horizon. In the great cycles of this place, ice recedes on a geologic clock, rivers hold to their ancient courses, and the vast grasslands carry the weight of seasons, leaving little trace of their passing. Human settlements cling to the earth where work once demanded them. Their skeletal remains a testament to endeavors that simply stopped, never to be has no need for ours. Nothing here asks for our understanding. It offers no explanation. It simply demonstrates, with brutal honesty, what it can support, and what it will inevitably reclaim. The land does not change for an audience. It changes for reasons, for pressure, for water, for time, and it endures.